So we've had three fairly academic talks about what carbon offset is. Now we have David who's going to tell us about more practical experience of actually doing this thing. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much. Hello, yes, my name is David Hunter. I'm the CEO and Director of Habitat People. We are a private conservation, and it says offsetting firm up there. It's not going to stay up very much longer. I was supposed to be coming here and talking today about the wonders of carbon offsetting, how brilliant it is. I'll be perfectly honest with you, over the last sort of 6 months to a year, business has kind of changed quite a lot. We gave a talk, one of the previous climate cafes, about how great offsetting was and that kind of thing, but very much changed now. And we're talking about the process of what we do and also why it is that we are changing what we're doing. So, are we working? I think we're okay. There we go. Need to press harder. Yep, so we run the National Meadow Carbon Code. This is an accreditation that we provide ourselves. So we audit data, we look into the quality of the land being used, and we provide the estimates for the amount of carbon produced. So we don't actually sell the carbon credits ourselves. What we do is we've created a system by which people can create wildflower meadows, largely on overused farmland, and then we will carry out a series of tests, put the information through models, give estimates of how much CO2 people can sell. So I'm going to hopefully addressing some of the things like leakage and additionality today in terms of what we do, and then go and talk a bit more about that kind of thing itself. So we've talked a lot about today about habitats themselves and how much variety there is in terms of different habitats sequestering CO2. Everyone seems to just want plant trees, although I think we're in quite a well-educated crowd today, so maybe people don't just think that. My business creates all kinds of habitats, from wetlands, wildflower meadows, woodlands, moorlands. If it's a natural UK ecosystem, then we will build it for you. But we are really passionate about semi-natural grasslands, what you call wildflower meadows or native hay meadows, and they do indeed store a fair bit of CO2 when put in the right place. So it's going to be a bit of less of an academic talk, I'm afraid. I run a business. I left academia a few years ago, so pretty pictures and that kind of thing, so you're going to have to bear with me. We've got a nice picture of a tree, as has already been kind of explained in the earlier talks. Only about 30% of that CO2 is sequestered above ground. 70% of that is stored in the soil carbon and in the root network. So it is incredibly important to look after our soil, carbon. And actually comparing it to wildflower meadows, about 97% of that is sequestered underground. Indeed, for a meadows lifestyle, if you like, so we have got farmland along the bottom there, it will be sequestering at a far faster rate of uptake compared to a woodland. So, looking at 10, 20 years for a woodland to get going with its sequestration, we can get a meadow going in a high intensity management of developing that habitat in about 3. So it's a much more rapidly applicable solution to climate change, although in the long term, you're not going to be sequestering as much CO2. We're kind of at the brink here with climate change. So potentially a more applicable short-term bandage over the wound, if you like, was where we were coming from with this. We've got wetlands at the top there as well. I think wetlands are largely underloved, largely because of the difficulty in measuring leakage in wetlands, but they are also an important sequesterer. So what does all that mean, and how are we addressing, how have we been addressing some of the issues that have been raised with offsetting tonight? So in terms of additionality, well, we take a base level for the CO2. We take a very, very complex series of models, and we largely only work with projects that are converting high intensity farmland, either pastoral or arable, into habitat. Basically, we don't work with anyone that's got a pre-existing habitat. No one's cutting down woodlands to create meadows to make money. But we've been asked, people laughing, we've been asked. So we make sure that this is only in high quality systems. The landowners and the participants, if it's a tenant farmer or a landowner, have to sign up for at least 25 years. Which for soil carbon is a significant portion of time. That's about when you're going to start peaking if you've lost CO2 from heavy agricultural use. and the unknown factor of how much breathing that soil is doing in terms of leakage, we actually take 50% off. So if you're making 500 tons a year on your land of CO2, you're actually only able to sell 250 of that. Soil carbon in meadows has a very large buffer with a very wide margin in terms of how much we actually know that's being stored in the ground. So to ensure that credits aren't being sold that don't exist, we say, right, cut 50% off for the first 5 years. You have to measure soil carbon over a very long time period again. So every 5 years, we take a series of measurements that we can input into the model that then informs what the soil's doing, how the soil carbon is looking. And actually at that 5-year gap, if it turns out, yeah, you have been storing 500 tons a year, also that's great. We'll release 30% of that back to the client so that they can then sell on at that 5-year point. Again, that incentivizes people to stick with the program, to not just say, well, we'll do a bit of farming at year 3, you know, we'll don't worry about that. Do 2 years of meadows and then we'll kick it off, and they won't know by year 5. It will be very obvious from the data if people are doing this. So it ensures compliance with the program, and it makes sure that we aren't selling CO2 credits that don't exist. We also ensure that credits sold through our system are not sold to businesses that already haven't gone through a reduction stage. We have a project site in Peterhead where we flag an example site, if you like, which we do sell credits ourselves through. It's the only site we'll ever have for this because, as I say, we can't really sell credits ourselves if we're accrediting it. Doesn't really, a bit ethical, no. So we've got one example site we use to sell credits through, and we only ever sell those to people who have evidence that they have actually reduced their emissions, they've gone through the process of reduction, and that this is the last step. Offsetting is a really interesting subject in that the initial idea is really exciting. You know, we've got a solution, we can do lots of things with it. The amount of CO2 we're talking about released by humanity is ridiculously large. One of the last Climate Cafe, that's really stuck with me and actually entirely changed the thinking around our business around this, is that if we restored the entire planet to natural habitat, removed humanity, flicked our fingers, got rid of the roads, the buildings, we are still not storing enough CO2 to mitigate our impact. So having spent 2 years building that system and hearing that and thinking, it's kind of got a point, really, was very sobering, very humbling. I did a lot of reading and a lot of understanding about carbon offsetting, about what we were doing in terms of the larger perspective, and why this isn't going to work in terms of a mitigation of climate change in the long term and the larger perspective. You know, China's emitted the same amount of CO2 in the last 60 years as the UK has since the Industrial Revolution. I can't plant enough trees to solve that. You know, it's not going to happen. So the reason this code was created is because we've lost 97% of our wildflower meadows in the UK, and they're not very economically viable. Hay is cheap. It's much more efficient to have low diversity hay meadows or low diversity overly grazed grasslands than it is to have a biodiverse meadow. So this system was designed to complement traditional pastoral and arable farming as a way to restore these grasslands, but also supplement the income of the farmers to do so. However, really what we're saying is we want nature, but no one's paying for nature. So what we're going to do is we're going to make meadow. We're going to use climate change as a proxy for ecological restoration and rewilding. So yeah, we work for businesses, clients, etc. I kind of already gone over that. And yeah, here's an example site for you before I move on. I've forgotten about the slides entirely and just rambled. So there we go. This is an example site of a Peterhead that we were talking about working with. You can about 262 tons a year. That's after the 50% has been taken over. And we're looking at a mature stage 5 meadow by 2025 under intensive management by our business. Usually takes about 10 years. We can get it done about 3 because we skip a few steps and help the habitat along the way. But you know, this is an area that's currently used in heavily intensive sheep farming, doesn't have a large amount of ecological diversity, but it has curlews, it has corn bunting, it has some interesting factors. That's really what we're caring about with this site. The carbon's a way to fund the conservation, if you like. And again, we want to do conservation, we want to do land management. Our whole business is so focused around that, and this is just a proxy. What we've been finding with the problems with the market that have been discussed, with the accreditation of things. So we accredit ourselves. We have no formal accreditation from the government, from NGO, from anyone. All of the data and the rigorous things we put our clients who build meadows through the Meadow Carbon Code are not accredited by the government. No one has to. You could go away right now and make a carbon code if you wanted to. No one's stopping you, and you can sell carbon credits. That's how easy it is. Okay. Because we are very stringent with what we do, and because we want to produce a high quality offset for people, we are very strict with it. But again, a problem we have found in the market, especially with agricultural land, is that there are a lot of people who make their own codes and say they're accredited, and there is very poor data out there. That is meaning that credit, a ton from us, which I think is really high quality, because you have to prove you've reduced your emissions. It's on a proper site, in terms of the land that's being used, and it's, in a long-term management. If they break that agreement for 25 years, for example, they have to pay back for every carbon credit that they have sold. Okay, so they have to give their money back. That is the incentive for them to stay in that system. That is the same value as someone who said, yeah, we got a field round the back, we're storing carbon, I promise. So, same economic value. So again, for economists, for academics, it's very difficult when you're talking to, again, small businesses like us, to know the scale of quality in carbon offsets. And over the last year, we've really found actually a lot of people interested in the word that came up earlier, which is natural capital. You're going to hear that word a lot over the next 10 years, I think, if you stay in this sphere. And really what it's saying is that biodiversity in nature is providing a vast, it's our life support system. It is keeping us alive. It is essential for human function. And so in the same way that you pay for your electricity bill, you pay for, your water, there will be biodiversity integrated into that system. It's going to happen slowly, but over time that is going to change. And so we have shifted away and used the Meadow Carbon Code as a learning experience to build our ecosystem services side of the business, to build our natural capital side of the business and our rewilding, so that we can actually fund the restoration we want to do in the first place. I wasn't going to talk particularly about this, but I'll talk a little bit about it now. Greenwashing. We've lost an awful lot of our biodiversity. The UK is one of the most ecologically degraded places on planet Earth now. Northeast Scotland is one of the worst places in the UK. So we're, bottom 0.5% of the planet in terms of habitat cover and intactness. So we are not doing very well. How do we address that? Well, basically, what my business has come up with, and this isn't a pitch, even though we are going for investment at this moment, so come chat to us afterwards if you want to. Essentially, what we've done is we've come up with a metric. Instead of measuring, okay, I'll ask you a question. How much is a house sparrow worth? Silence. No one knows the answer. Everyone is going to have a different value for that. It is impossible to come up with a value for an endangered species, for a common species, for a habitat. So what we've done is instead we have developed a system that measures the change of biodiversity, the improvement, and a metric for that improvement is much easier to create than one for monitoring a single species. What we've done is we've broken up our site for our wildflower meadow offsets into square meters, and we're attaching those square meters onto people's invoices and receipts. And every time, so you're buying a watch for 300 quid, they then sell it for 310. We keep £7. They get 3 as an incentive to join up to the system. And that £7 pays for the management of that square meter of meadow for a year. Okay, and that's a much more straightforward way of getting money from the business, the transaction. About 98% of the people we've talked to who are customers of businesses that we are working with in this system are very happy with paying a little bit more for an area of land they know where it is. And that QR code, a QR code is attached to that square meter. on the receipt or the invoice of the customer as well. So they know exactly where it is, they know how much CO2 it's storing, how much biodiversity is there. And yeah, carbon is a metric as part of a bigger system rather than the end product itself. Again, some of the market research we did when we were doing the meadow carbon code and creating that, people don't really want to store it in the ground. It's kind of dirty. You think of big oil, you think of industry, the people who've, the industries that have caused the problems in the first place. And it feels a little bit like covering their tracks, was the impression we got from customers. What they did like is planting trees. They liked green space. They liked the nature aspect. And so what we're saying is actually people want nature. And that's what we are now hoping to push. And carbon will be an aspect of that rather than the overall product. So yeah, that slide is irrelevant, but there we go. That's me. Thanks very much.